Disclaimer: the views expressed on this episode of Perspective Platoon with Prateek are solely the opinions of the host and the guest. The content of the conversation is not reflective of the institutions or establishments mentioned therein. Take all these opinions with a pinch of salt and a dash of lime if needed.
Hey Pawan, how's it going?
It's going pretty well, Pratik. Thank you for having me on this podcast. I've been looking forward to it since you sent me that invite.
Of
Yeah.
course, man. Thank you so much for saying yes. I'm glad we're able to do this, even though we're living
Yeah.
in different paths. So that's awesome that we're able to do this. But before we get
Yeah.
started, if you could let everybody know who you are, what you do, future
Mhm.
aspirations, likes, dislikes in everyday life, your spiel, whatever you're comfortable sharing.
Hey, everybody. So I'm Pawan Bhandarkar, and currently I'm in India. I know Pratik because we studied in the same college for a couple of years, and we were classmates for one of them. And after that, we kind of went our own separate ways. But now I am working. Well, I was working as an AI engineer at a tech firm in Japan. But now I'm taking a short break before my master's degree, which starts in fall of this year. In the meantime, I've been working and studying a little bit on some IT related stuff for preparing myself for my master's degree. But my general domain of work is computer science, software engineering, web development, that whole sphere. So thanks for having me here, Pratik. Let's go ahead with the call.
Cool. Yeah, totally, man. Totally. Starting off, what was that experience like in Japan? Moving there for
Mhm.
for however long you were there. What was that general experience like?
It was honestly it was a mixed bag, I would say. It well definitely takes a little bit of getting used to, especially their culture, their food, and everything. But once you get past that initial set of hurdles, it's generally okay for you to live. The locals there don't speak a lot of English, so it's gonna be hard for you to get your everyday stuff like you go grocery shopping or I don't know, you want to go to a bank to make a money to make a transfer or whatever. These things can be a little troublesome because you have to either have a friend with you who speaks Japanese or use an app constantly to talk with them. But apart from that, I think it's okay because because of the amount of technology there, you can generally live there in a self-sufficient manner where you can scan stuff to make payments and self-checkout and all that, so it's okay. But the only thing is, if you're a vegetarian, then Godspeed to you. But otherwise, I think it's okay for you. As a non-vegetarian, if you're open to trying new cuisines, you can generally make do over there. It was fun. I definitely love my time there. Although work with my colleagues was a little hard because I had to use translations for most of them. But apart from that, I think it was a very good experience.
Hmm. And if you don't mind sharing, what part of Japan were you living in?
I was in Fukuoka, which is the Fukuoka city in the Fukuoka prefecture on the island called Kyushu, which is the southernmost island in the that set of islands that Japan is. Southernmost island is Kyushu, and on that I was living on Fukuoka city. It's pretty nice. It's like the way I would describe it is it's the perfect balance between a city life and the countryside because the way you live, if you ever feel like you're tired of your routine IT work or you're going to an office every day seeing the same set of people, same set of buildings, you can just get on one train and just ride it all the way to the countryside, get off, and it's beautiful mountains and hills, and you can go on hikes and treks. It's very nice. So it's like that perfect balance where you can at any point make the choice, go to the countryside, come back to the city. It's a great place to be, honestly.
That's awesome. I mean, and at the end of the day, it's an experience that you get something to take away from, right? So, in
Yeah,
that
yeah,
sense,
yeah.
like, what were some things that you took away from that experience of having to live in Japan for a few
Hmm.
years?
Well, what I would take away, honestly, is you have to be open to a lot of new cultures and new experiences. And well, I would say there were a few culture shocks, right? So I did not expect to for you know, well, okay, let me put it this way. Whenever you go someplace new, you generally have an idea of what to expect, right? For example, for me in Japan, before going to Japan, my main idea of Japan was what I learned from social media or from friends or family or other people who I had conversations with about Japan. So from that, what I
Okay.
gathered was it's this place where there is technology everywhere, and everyone is super polite to you, and it's a very safe country. It's a good place to live, good salaries. This is what you, I mean, of course, there's the whole anime and manga thing, which is, it's a part of me that I don't want to expose right now. But I embrace Japanese. I like Japanese culture, like in general. So these were the thoughts that I had in my mind when I went there for the first time. But then you realize there is quite a huge difference in between the narrative that is sold to you and reality that you face over there. Some of it is true, some of it is has been exaggerated, but all in all, it's something that you have to be mentally ready. That disparity that you have between your image and the reality, you have to be ready for it. For instance, it, what the whole technology is everywhere, at least that part, remember. So when you think of Japan, you think of like high tech, like future utopia shit, right? But what I experienced there was Japan has excellent hardware, but their software isn't quite what you might expect. Now, for instance, if you go to a convenience store, right? You don't really have to talk to anyone there. You can go straight, pick up what you want, go to the checkout counter, scan everything, pay using your card or phone or whatever, and you can leave. But that's one side of the coin. On the other side, schools in Japan, especially in COVID, when people were forced to stay at home and not mingle around so much, anywhere else in the world, you'd think that they would switch to an entirely online system of teaching, right? Because that's what we did here in India or even in the States or anywhere else, I imagine. That's what we did. We went online. We made all these, whatever was being taught in person, we would teach it over maybe Zoom or Google Meet or these online classes. We would send our notes and all those in terms of PDFs and documents. But not Japan. So what Japan did, well, at least in the place that I was living, I don't know if this applies for the whole country, but the place that I was living, teachers were still required to go to college, were required to go to schools. Now, the students themselves would stay at home, but the teachers would go to school, and whenever there was an assignment that the kids had to do, the teachers would have to mail hard copies of the assignment to each and every student who went to their class. And these kids would receive their assignments by post. They would fill it in and then they would post it back to them. So this, I mean, at least for me, completely shattered the high-tech futuristic image that I had of Japan. And this was true in other areas as well. For instance, if you go to a bank in Japan, you would be baffled by the number of documents, physical documents that you have to get printed, signed, translated if you don't speak Japanese, sign it, submit it manually at the bank. Whereas, even in India, if you have to open an account in the bank, I opened two accounts just sitting on this chair in front of this table within a couple of hours in India, right? So I think the narrative in some situations has been greatly exaggerated, and there, like I said, the point here is you should be ready to expect a difference in what what the image has been built in your head. So that was something that I experienced. This is something that I'm going to take away, to just set realistic expectations, I guess, and even if I go somewhere new, be ready to accept that it may not live up to your expectations. That's what I would have to say.
Yeah, that's very interesting thought because usually so for example, like even if someone is moving to the US or the UK, you have this
Mm-hmm.
conception of the entirety of the US or the UK looking like New York or California or
Mm-hmm.
London, while in reality that's not the case. Like
Right,
even the
right.
United States, it's quite a vast country, and when you look at it, there's some places that only have like 80,000 people as like the city's
Mm-hmm.
population, whereas there's
Mm-hmm.
others where they have like 100,000 people and more. So it's quite fascinating to sort of think of that always, because when you come here, I feel like it's that level of expectation that I don't want to say gets shattered, but you sort of
Right, right, right.
it sort of shakes you a little bit. You're like, or I
Yeah,
guess I
yeah,
could say
definitely.
that it shatters your expectations in some sense. It's not a big. Um, but yeah, it's interesting. It takes a level of adjustment to realize that okay, this is different and that it's not what I expected it to be. But I don't
Mhm.
necessarily think that that's a bad thing. Do you think that that's a bad thing, generally speaking?
Not at all. Actually, I don't think that's a bad thing, because if anything, it teaches you how to be more robust, I guess, towards your approach for anything in life. Because I mean, if you're the kind of person who wants your expectations met every single time, then I don't know. That's your cup of tea. But for me, I've always this at least this has helped me learn to adapt. Improvise, adapt, and overcome whenever I met a situation like this. So even in the US, right, for instance, where I'm going to be coming in August, as I said. So I have, because of this, because of the experience I had in Japan, I now know how to set my expectations better for my time there. I know it's not going to be all sunshine and rainbows over there, and I know how to prepare contingencies in case some things do not go well. For instance, I know rent in California can be quite expensive, right? Why? Well, like, okay, this is a good example, in fact. So initially, people would say New York is the most expensive. It's one of the most expensive places ever. But now it turns out that there are other places, even for example, now people say Texas is very cheap when compared to New York. But in reality, even if you went to Texas, right, how cheap is it really if you compare the cost of living and the other expenses that you'll be incurring, the income that you would get over there? It's generally quite comparable. So it's not quite black and white to say one place is cheaper and the other place is better. So I know how to like at least expect these disparities and prepare for them. So even in California, I've been going through a lot of different websites looking for options, trying to compare all the rent, the cost of living, and all of that. And I know even if it doesn't really meet my expectations, I'm going to be in a position to at least manage my time during my stay in the states. So
Yeah,
I think it's okay. It's helped me set more realistic expectations from any place that I go to.
totally, totally. And I think the difference is that with the states like New York and California, there's a lot of taxes, like in comparison to like state taxes. Because I mean, like
Hmm.
I forget what the tax system in India is like, honestly, but
It's
they
okay.
have
I've
federal
lived here for
taxes and
23
state
years, and
taxes.
I don't know what the tax system here is.
Fair enough, fair enough, fair enough. But yeah, so there's federal taxes and there's state taxes, right? So I think California and New York are known to have higher state tax rates, whereas Texas doesn't
Hmm.
have a state tax. So that's where the
Hmm.
difference comes in for like people who are making a gross income. I think the level of deductions
Hmm.
are quite less in comparison to those two
In
states.
in
Like that's the
Texas,
thing that
I see.
in Texas in comparison, because I think there's like 7 or 8 states that they don't have state taxes. I think
Hmm.
Texas, Florida,
Oregon,
Washington
I think one
State,
of them.
not DC. Yeah, I think those are one of the few. Those are some of the states that don't. Tennessee. Yeah, those are some of the states that don't have state taxes, if I'm not mistaken.
I see.
Um,
I see. Okay.
but yeah, that I think that's like the major difference that people tend to mention. But anyway, I mean,
Hmm.
yeah, as you mentioned earlier, we both met each other at Canada Pre-University College back in 2014, right?
Yes, yes. 2014 to 16 is when
2014.
we were. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but I left Canada in 2015 because, I mean, long story short, I moved to boarding school for a year
Right.
after that.
Hmm.
But yeah, that's how we met. So yeah, I mean, let's start there. Let's go back. Let's wind the clock a little. I guess 8 years back now. Geez, it's wild to say that it's been 8 years. Fuck. But yeah, I mean, what memories do you have of the time in the integrated class? Let's put it that way.
Oh, memories, right. Uh, Whenever I think of integrated class, there is only one face that pops up, I think, in all our minds. One face with a huge tilaka on his forehead.
Yeah, I know what we're
So
talking about. Yeah.
I'm not going to name him, but that physics professor forever changed my perspective of professors everywhere. And I think except for maybe one or two people that he favored, I don't think anybody in our class really liked that guy. But yeah, I think the things that he made us go through, you know, I think that really made me appreciate other professors a lot more. Now, every time I have a bad experience with a professor, I think, well, at least it's not that guy. So at least that you have that going for you. Yeah. So yeah, I
Yeah,
think whenever
yeah.
I think of integrate, the things that stand out to me were the three professors who taught us. That's the first thing. And the second thing that I remember very distinctly about our time there is the time we all were made to kneel down outside the class as
Yeah,
punishment for something.
I still.
I think it was because we went to a movie and saw, and one of his pies caught us. Remember? I think we went to a movie or we celebrated a birthday somewhere, but then we bunked classes and we celebrated a birthday somewhere, I think.
I
But
thought
then
it was
someone
homework
report
related.
no, it wasn't. It was because we were all of us bunked classes,
Oh,
I think.
okay. Maybe it was. Maybe I'm
So,
forgetting.
so I
But I do
think
remember that punishment
we
that you're talking about, though. Yeah,
right. So all the
yeah.
girls were made to stand inside the class, but the guys were made to kneel down outside in that corridor. That was so. I think it was because we bunked classes and we went to a mall. I think to celebrate someone's birthday, or we went to watch a movie. But someone saw us and reported to him that his students were bunking classes, and then he punished us with that nonsense. That's one of the
Hmm.
most distinct memories I have. Thirdly, I would say would be the rivalry that the non-integrated professors had with this guy. I don't know if you remember.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, those three were the most distinct memories that I have of integrated
yeah.
batch.
It's interesting because yeah. I mean, like you said, we're not going to mention his name, but he he had his own ways of doing things,
Mm-hmm.
which yeah, like you said, right? It sort of makes you appreciate certain things that we might not necessarily like about other professors or teachers. No, I mean, I
Mm-hmm.
don't want to make this into a party where we're just pooping on him all over, but I am curious to know, like, from your own sort of perspective, what was it? What am I trying to say? More so in the perspective of being a teacher for students at that age, because this is something I think that matters, but we don't probably think about as much. Is the level of sort of mental impact these people leave in you on that they leave on you, like
Mm-hmm.
be it the punishments, be it the way they treat you or whatever, now again, I'm not saying that he's a bad person, because I mean, I've
Mm-hmm.
only seen him for a year, so I don't think
Yeah,
that's enough to judge a
honestly,
person's character,
I
but
don't think
yeah.
he was a bad person, but I think he came to our college with skewed expectations of what to expect. In his own words,
Hmm.
he used to mentor a lot of IIT students from Hyderabad. I don't know if you remember. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
these kids, mind you, were people who have been preparing for years for the JE exams, JE mains, JE advanced, right? He came straight from mentoring those kids with their discipline and their work ethic, and he expected the same from students of our college who had a completely different background, completely different lifestyles. We were not, we are not even the same cultural background. So I think he came here with the wrong expectations, and he himself was disappointed, which was quite to be expected, and we ended up not getting we got, and I don't know, I would like to say suboptimal level of education for that first year.
Yeah, those level of expectations that you were mentioning, I think, especially, or well, I guess I should preface this by saying, for those of you listening who are not aware, JE Mains and JE Advanced are exams that students in India take to get into certain engineering colleges. JE Mains mainly for NITs and JE Advanced
Hmm.
for IITs. If at any point I'm wrong in saying any of this, please correct me, Pawan. But
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
so basically, we were in these classes because we would get sort of a crash course level, uh, I guess, with multiple influences to learn how to crack some of these exams. At least that was what we were sold.
Mm.
By at least that was what we were sold, was that we would get to learn some of these tips and tricks, some of these nuances that would help us take these exams and ace them. Well,
Mhm.
different things happen to different people, so but that's that. But yeah, I do sort of agree with your the thing that sorry, I just shook the thing that my laptop's on. But the level of expectations, right? It's wild to think about that some of these students start training for JE mains and advanced when they're like in 8th or ninth grade. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, you're right. Exactly.
Yeah, like what is the sort of chain there in that? How early do some people start? Like, I mean, I think you have a better idea of this than I do.
No,
Um,
I think you're right about. I think eighth is generally when these kids are starting to study for. Well, I don't want to say kids are starting. These kids are made to start. Like, I mean, think about it. Right? If you are in the eighth grade, would you actively make a choice to spend the next 5 years of your life towards one single goal? Right now, okay, fine. If this is something that you're passionate about, if if this was something, for example, at the age of when you're in the eighth grade, you might have ambitions like, oh, I want to be a teacher, or I want to be a doctor, I want to be a politician. I don't know. You might have your own aspirations, right? But I don't think it's very common for for a kid to naturally aspire to get into a college, at least when you're in eighth grade, right? Like,
right.
why would you? I don't think that's normal for a kid to think, okay, I'm in the eighth grade, I want to spend the next 5 years just to get into this one college. Like, what are the sacrifices that you're making there if that's what you really want to do? So what happens here is that a lot of parents, right? Well, to be honest, right now, these decisions of which college to get into, or even how much marks you need to get, or what rank you need to get, these decisions or these expectations are quite, how do I put it? They've been inflated in the minds of these parents,
Mhm.
right? I think they put more importance on these numbers than realistically, that more, they put more emphasis than is required in terms of how important these numbers are. For instance, when I was in 10th grade, my parents made a huge deal about me getting more than 600, because the total score that you could get was 625. So I don't know, this 600 to 625 seemed to be like the sweet spot where every parent wanted their kid to get in. At that point, when I was in ninth, when I was in 10th working towards it, I did not quite understand why it was so important to get over 600, because I thought, okay, maybe if I get over 600, it's going to help me dramatically improve my chances in my future. It might help me get a significantly better career. But now looking back on it, that number, it meant nothing, right? No, as long as you get enough to qualify for the next level of study, apart beyond that, that number meant nothing other than just empty prestige and bragging rights. So I think coming back to the point, when you talk about these exams of JE mains or JE advanced, to some extent it is important to get into IITs, because they help you get better jobs. For example, if you compare apples to apples, and if you compare the prospects of someone from my college who graduated with a degree in CS versus someone from an IIT who graduated with a degree in CS, you of course, the person with an IIT degree in CS will have better options. But there have been cases where parents wanted to put their kids in IIT just for the sake of IIT. So when this happens, they generally force their kids to start very early to learn for this JE mains, JE advanced, and when they get into IIT, they are ready to settle for any specialization just because it's IIT. This ends up in kids taking up streams that they don't really like. Maybe, for example, if I was really passionate about computer science and I got into IIT, and my parents were, in this category of parents who want to push their kids into IIT, then there may have been a scenario where, I dropped CS entirely and took something that's, relatively easier to get into just because it's an IIT. So this, I think, it's quite detrimental to kids, to be honest, especially kids around that age.
Yeah, 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 totally, totally. Because I mean, I remember I even took the NEET a year later and all that.
Mm-hmm.
Made a zero in physics. Did so well that I made a zero. You know, yeah, because I was telling somebody this the other day while I was recording too. For NEET, like the scoring was you would get X number of points if you answered something correct, but you would get
Mm-hmm.
Y number of points deducted if you got something wrong. So I balanced myself out by
Oh,
getting
right.
zero. Right. So,
Right, right.
but yeah,
Mhm.
it is interesting in that, parents are sort of, well, let me ask you this. Do you think parents are sort of sold this dream too of like, oh, get your kid into IIT, he's going to make a good pay packet. And the reason I ask that is because what I've sort of understood is that parents at the end of the day want their kids to be financially secure. Now,
Mm-hmm.
that's just how I look at it. I mean, that's how I sort of notice things to sort of be thought about. But I'd like to get your opinion on it. Like, do you think that it's from a level of them wanting you to be financially secure that they're pushing their kids to do these things? Now, again, I'm not necessarily justifying it by saying that it's the right thing to do, but I'm just saying
Mm-hmm.
that that is one of the root causes to where I feel parents tend to push their kids into some of these things, because they know, or that they've seen around society, that hey, if your kid's studied in an NIT or an IIT, he's going to make bank and he's going to be
Correct.
settled for the rest of his life,
Mm-hmm.
and all those pipe dreams. So yeah, what's your take on that? I'm just curious to know.
Yeah, so there are 2 points to be raised here, right? The first point is addressing your question. I definitely think that parents generally put their kids through this because they want them to be in a financially stable situation once they graduate, right? So that is mostly the motivation for for parents putting their kids there. But I think there are also certain exceptional cases where the brand value of these IITs kind of overpower the the other side of it. The brand itself sometimes can be more important than the outcome of the degree. But I think for vast majority of it, we can make the argument that parents want what's best for their kids. Now that's fine. That's the argument for your question. But what I feel is that a lot of, like you said, all this info, the source of information that these parents get, right? This information, this opinion that helps them form their opinion that IIT is good. I think that source, it kind of suffers from this bias, because
Hmm.
you see a lot of information that you find are posted by winners, like people who went to IIT and made it big. Those are the stories that you hear most, most widespread on media, right? Wherever it may be, Facebook, WhatsApp, whatever these parents are referring, even word of mouth. It's the winners, it's the story of the winners that get propagated. There are plenty of people who went to IIT and didn't make it. There are plenty of people who went into a career just because it's IIT and not what they really wanted, and then later regretted it. People who dropped out, people who did not make bank, right? But these stories, where are these stories, right? How often do you come across, how often do you read an article about someone who failed or someone who came second at life, right? It's always the people who win. It's, you hear about them and you think of, you read their stories, right? You hear about some kid from your hometown who spent 4 years of his life studying for JE, got all India rank, and went to IIT, got into Google, made bank, and it's now living the life of his dream. You look at it and you think to yourself, I can be like that guy. Like, we have a similar background. Why can't I do what he did, right? What if I spend the next 4 years of my life doing exactly what he did, and then go to IIT and then make bank just like him? This dream is sold to you because the stories that are being fed are the stories of winners. But there is still the chance that because we're all different people at the end of the day, right? What you know and what he knows, or what the experiences that you had, the life experiences, the upbringing, the cultural background, it's all of this comes into the picture. So at the end, it's only you and how you go through that degree that's going to define, your success or your definition of success, right? But that's the thing, when it comes to parents, or at least the people who are making these decisions for you at an early point in your life, I think they don't take all these factors into accommodation, into what is it, accommodation, I mean, into consideration. So
Right.
sorry, I can't speak. I've been speaking for so long. English has become difficult for me. So I think
Oh, good.
you get the point, right? They suffer from this bias where it's all sunshine and rainbows for people who go to IIT. But I think in many cases it can take a very significant physical and mental toll on these kids. I mean, think about it, just us, right? We had to come to class every day at 7 a.m. and stay in class till, I think it was 7 p.m., wasn't it? I remember having we
6, I
coming
think.
late. 6, yeah. So it was almost 12 hours of classes, which is not normal, right? I mean, most kids our age at that time were doing what, 9 to 4? It seems like a reasonable amount of time to spend in class in a day, but we were doing from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. But there are also people who went to even drastic extent, who were in classes from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. or even 10 p.m., spending almost all their time being awake preparing for these exams, which is, I mean, it can't be healthy. Come on.
Yeah.
physically or mentally. It cannot be. Is it really worth it? After one point, you have to ask yourself: Is, do the ends justify the means? In a lot of cases, it
Hmm.
doesn't. I think.
Yeah. Yeah. When you mentioned that 12-hour thing, it reminded me of Expert, because Expert did a similar thing, right? I mean, not to call
Yeah.
out somebody, but or a school. Um,
Right.
you
Right.
know, it's they also did something similar. I think there were a lot of places that did something similar to where they had those 12-hour classes 6 days a
Mm-hmm.
week. Um, just come in, get your brain sort of mashed with all of this stuff, and then leave, and then sleep, and then
Right.
get back up, repeat over and over again. So at some point it does become quite taxing, mentally and
Yeah.
physically. But you made
For
an
sure.
interesting point about the fact that we don't get to hear the stories of those that didn't make it. And sometimes I feel like to sort of give an odd comparison to what you said. We'd rather wear a Nike shoe than wear just any shoe. Because I mean,
Mm-hmm.
any shoe is
Exactly.
going to serve the purpose of being a
Right.
shoe. But we
Mm-hmm.
want to wear that Nike shoe because it's gonna bring more eyes and all that. So that's definitely a thing that unfortunately some people take into consideration. But I do want to
Mm-hmm.
ask, like, do you think that it's important for us to hear the stories of those, or maybe more so for the parents who are making these decisions, to hear the stories of those that didn't make it?
Oh, definitely. I think so. I think, at least listening to the stories of these people who didn't make it, or maybe even the people who did make it. There are also cases of people who did make it, who later realized that the amount that they sacrificed to get there was not worth it. Right? I'm sure a lot of people have those stories to tell as well. So I think it's important for parents to hear these stories and then really, paint a holistic picture of whether this is really the best path for me to put my kid on, right? Because is it possible? I think but the question that parents need to ask themselves is it possible for my kid to gain the same amount or at least comparable amount of success by taking the path that he chooses? How can I support them in being successful in what they want to do instead of making them in conforming them to your decision, your definition of success? Because as times changed, right, the definition of success has also changed, right? And
Right.
if you go to my parent, my dad's or even my grandfather's generation, at that time, what was success was having one big store in Car Street where people are coming every day and buying. You were the store guy, the person that people came up. You were generating the most revenue. That's what success was at that time. Or maybe if you go even further back, success was, if you owned the most amount of horses in the town, maybe that's what made you successful. But right now there's like so many new, the definition of success has been modernized, I feel. So there's power, there's money. There are some people who pursue a good mental health. As there are some people who say that if 5 years down the line I can be in a place where I'm happy regardless of my income, maybe that's success for you. And there are some people who say, 5 years down the line I want to have X amount of money. That's success for me. So all of us have our own definitions of success, right? And all of us will have different paths to reach there, regardless of how we want, what that may be. I think parents should really have a discussion with their kids. They should, first of all, they should understand what your kid will be sacrificing to get to what you think is success, right? You think that IIT is success, but this is what your kid has to do to get there, right? So I think the parents should ideally have like a mature conversation with their kids, and at the end, it should be the student's decision about which path they have to take.
Right, right, right. Just for, I mean, I like the reference to Car Street. And for those of you listening who are not aware, Car Street is like one of the, I guess, in some sense, quite iconic streets in central Mangalore.
Yeah.
So there is that. But in terms of, yeah, like you're saying, right, the decision that parents make about where they want to see their kids' future, possibly, it has a lot of implications on their lives. And unfortunately, there's stories of also suicides and such things like that, to where a lot of the times it can feel like these kids have reached a point of no return. Where
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've been lucky, to where I've never felt like there was no point of return. Like, I've never felt, knock on wood, any time in my life where, oh, this is the point of no return. Like, there's nothing I can do from here. But I feel
Mm-hmm.
like because of the way the sort of system makes you think, or because of the way that, we hear certain stories, when you fail, be it in a JEE mains exam or like in your courses in in IIT or in IT or wherever, I think a lot of kids feel that there's nothing that they can do,
Yeah, like they've been
you
defeated,
know?
and yeah.
Right. So I'm just curious, like, why is it that that happens? Like, I mean, we can't speak for those people, but just from your own personal opinion, I'm curious to know, because I think another important thing that parents need to inculcate, decisions and all that. Like, see, I mean, I agree with you, but I also do think that at 18, we don't know what the fuck we want to do the next minute. How can we
Mhm.
decide what we want to do the next 10 years? You know what I'm saying? So it's, the decision, while we do make that decision at 18, I do feel like
Mhm.
parents, and this is just a personal opinion, but I do feel like parents need to sort of inculcate this in their kids, to where they know, okay, if this doesn't work out, that is fine. You are not going to be you're not going to be a loser for the rest of your life. You can still
Mhm.
start from zero and still figure something out.
Right.
Will you get what you dreamed of? Question mark. I don't know, but you can still figure out a way to get there, but on a different path. So I feel like that's something that parents need to inculcate in their kids as well. So yeah, what's your thoughts on that in general? Like, sort of realizing that you can figure something else out and get to where you want to go, but through a different path.
Mhm. So I think, yeah, no, I 100% agree with what you said, that parents. So I think you're definitely right in saying that at 18 we only have 18 years of experience, right, on earth, whereas our parents who are 40s or whatever their age may be, it's clear that they have a lot more experience in life, and they have a better idea of the kind of obstacles that you might face in your future, right? So I think, given this experience, a lot of parents wrongly arrive at this conclusion that
Hmm.
because you are so much more experienced than your kid, you have the right to tell them what to do. Now, this is true to some extent, but more important than telling your kids what to do, I think you should educate them about how to decide for themselves, right? Because your experience, your experience in life has now put you in the position of being a teacher for the student that is your kid. So you have to explain to them, So when you came up with this question, right, the first story that came to my mind is that of John Krasinski, the actor. He had come on
Hmm.
a talk show. I'm not. I think maybe it was Jimmy Kimmel or Jimmy Fallon. I'm not sure, but I remember him talking about something very similar. When he was just starting out in his career, he had a discussion with his mother where he said that he wanted to become an actor. But before that, he was working as a waiter, I believe. He was working at a waiter at some restaurant. But at one point, he decided that for his future, he wanted to be an actor. Now, we all know John Krasinski as Jim Halpert from The Office, right? And after The Office, he went on to do big things. But at the time, he was just a waiter. And he told his mother about it. And of course, at that point, you might expect that his mother would have, as natural. It become going from being having some job to giving it all up and trying to pursue a dream in Hollywood. That's like one of the biggest gambles that you can make as a kid, right? As an 18-year-old. But his mother said, "Fine, you go, you pursue your dream, you try it for 1 year, but after 1 year, if you are not able to make it, you have to come back. Because as a parent, I cannot watch you suffer, right? So you're going to promise me that you're going to go, you're going to give it your best shot, and after a year, if you're not going to be able to make it, you have to come back, and you have to look for other opportunities. Because as a parent, I cannot keep supporting you if you are not able to make it in the year. As a parent, she expressed her fears. So after a year of trying, now these numbers may not be exactly right, but I'm just trying to recollect them to the best of my ability. I believe so. He tried for a year, but he didn't make it. And when that year was ending, he called his mother and he told him, "Mom, it's not working out for me. I'm just going to come back and do what I was doing." So at that point, his mother, for some reason, said, "You know what? It's been a year. You try for another month. If you can't make it in another month, you come back." And it was in that month that John Krasinski landed the role of The Office, which changed his entire life forever. Right? So you see, I think this story is what, I don't know how easy it is to convince our parents about it, but the point here is, because you have so much experience, right? I think you should use that experience to support your kid, and try to make them understand, because someone who's 18 is, definitely going to be in a place to have a mature conversation about it. You talk to them about how they could go about this, achieving what they want to achieve, how they can achieve, how they can try to achieve their goals, and assure them, what, give it your best shot. If you can't do it, I'll support you still. I'm still going to love you. We're going to figure something out, right? I think that's the kind of mindset that parents should be approaching this situation, even in the case of IITs or anything. I think it's fine to tell your kids, what, try this. Do I try? If you want to spend 4 years of your life working hard towards this exam, but even if you can't make it, it's okay, because there are other things that you can still do. It's not the end of the world. I think that is something that a lot of parents should be talking to their kids about. That's what I think
100%,
about.
100%. No, no, totally, totally. I'm with you on that, because um, a lot of the times I think, and this is just a point that sort of popped up in my head as you were talking, they've experienced the real world, but they try to create an ideal world for us, not possibly seeing that it's not going to be an ideal world, because at the end of the day, an ideal world is just a dream,
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
So I think it's that realization that, I mean, I don't know about you, but I'd love to be a parent in the future, and that's something that I think about sometimes. I'm like, I've learned certain things so far, but there's
Mm-hmm.
some things that I need to realize, and you know also note that life for my child is going to be very different from the way I lived my life. you
Mm-hmm.
know right
Exactly. Yeah.
now right now parents see becoming or right now parents see the IIT or students or all those people as like the ideal goal to be, or the ideal place to be. Who knows, 20 years later people are probably looking at YouTube as being like, go become a YouTuber, or go become a content creator, like who the fuck knows? Because
Exactly.
I
Yeah.
mean, when you look at the likes of Mr. Beast or PewDiePie and whatever, and the amount of work that they've been able to
Exactly.
do and the amount of money that they've been able to make, now younger people are exposed to this. So I wonder if we will see that translate in such a way to where parents are trying to make their kids become YouTubers. And I mean, there's already
Exactly.
YouTube
Maybe.
courses out there where people are teaching other people how to become a YouTuber
Oh,
and all that.
really? I
But
didn't know
anyway,
about this. There are YouTube courses? Wow.
oh, there's a ton. Yeah, there's a ton. Like some
Oh,
YouTubers
really?
themselves make. There's some YouTubers themselves that make courses where if you pay them like $50 or something, you can get a course to learn how to get 100,000 subscribers.
Wow. Amazing.
Yeah, right. So that's already a thing. So, um, to each their own. I mean, I'm not necessarily judging people for the choices they make, but you never know. Like, you never know how these things will translate into the future. But you do mention
Right.
something really interesting about suffering, and it also reminded me. I can't remember the specific quote, but I don't know if you've heard of. Have you heard of the writer Viktor Frankl?
I don't think I have.
He wrote a book called "A Man's Search for
Meaning?
Meaning of
I think I've
Life."
heard of that. I think it's just
Yeah, a
called A
man's
Man's Search for Meaning. Yeah. I heard of the book. I haven't
yeah,
heard of the. Mm-hmm.
right. Um, yeah, I forget the title of the book too now. But anyway, he was living in the time of the Holocaust, and he said something really interesting in his book about suffering. Which, I mean, when you mentioned it, it sort of popped up in my head about you know what I took away from the book, because I feel like I'll get into a rabbit hole with this, but I'll stop myself before I do. At the end of the day, what we read from books is our own interpretation of what we understand. So, to my understanding, it seemed like or what he was trying to say was that suffering is part of life. There's no choice.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you can't choose whether you're going to suffer or not. You will suffer, fortunately or
Right.
unfortunately. Do you think that that's something that we as young adults also need to realize? Because I mean, now again, like some people suffer at an extent that we probably can't even fathom. We can't even fathom the thoughts that they have, the sort of daily struggles that they have. 100%. I'm not necessarily denying that, but I do think that it's important to realize that, like going back to your own line earlier, it's not going to be all sunshine and rainbows. um you are going to face challenges, but At the end of the day, I think we need to learn to face these challenges. Do you think that we learn that at a young age, or have we learned that in our schooling years, or have we learned that after getting out of school?
Hmm, that's a good question. So the question here is that, do you think we'll be able to learn how to face our challenges, and at what point in our lives will we learn that, right?
Sure, I guess if you want to, yeah, because I made that quite loaded. I apologize for making that very wordy, but yeah, basically, yeah, like when do we learn, or like from your own personal perspective, when did you think you learned how to face a challenge? Like, did you learn that in school, or did you learn that after? And yeah, how do you look at that?
I see. I think this is a very a good question, but I think it's also one which has a lot of, it's, you're going to get different answers depending on who you ask it to, right? Because
Yeah.
all of us, even now, in my case, right, I was just to slightly deviate from this a bit. I was diagnosed with a condition called Crohn's disease in 2014. I'll get to that. But this condition, it's a chronic condition which has its own up and downs, and its own challenges that as I go through life. Now, just put a point on that. Now, other than that, I've had a mostly normal life. For example, if you compare me with someone from my own batch, right? For example, I have some friends who I've known since first standard. So from first standard up till the end of engineering, we've been classmates. We've been in the same courses, the same classes, and all of that. So if you just compare the two of us, right, side to side, apples to apples, if you compare the both of us, even though we've been on the mostly identical paths to where we are right now, the challenges that we've faced have been drastically different. We may have had the same classes, the same courses, same subjects, same exams, but the challenges that you have to overcome in order to reach the same end goal, it's different for different people. Because for me, when I was in my high school, or even in my plus one, plus two, and even for the first year of engineering, right, I was not only going through the regular courses, but this was a time in my life where physically and physically I was going through a lot because of my condition. I was on a lot of medications constantly. There was fatigue, a lot of body pain, and all of that. But all these things, now that I'm here, right, no one really knows that I went through all those things. They're going to judge me based on where I am right now. But and they're just going to say, oh, this guy is, compared to his friend, maybe you just see where me and this friend of mine are, and you're just going to compare us based on where we've reached, and then make a call on who's better or who's worse, or maybe this guy hasn't had it so well in life, he hasn't worked hard enough. So you people will only be able to judge you based on where you are, but they'll never know the struggles that you went through, because all of us have our own problems, right? So again, like I said, because of my condition, I think I was able to realize that it's not going to be all that easy for me. So I have to learn, I have to adapt as quickly as possible, and know that I can't use this condition as an excuse for how do I put it? I can't keep using this condition as an excuse for not doing my best, right? So down some 5 years down the line, or 10 years down the line, I don't want to be in a position where I say, it's because of this that I couldn't achieve what I wanted. So because of this, I wanted to overcome it and not let a disease define me. And thanks to that, I think I've been able to learn at a very young age to face adversity and get what I really wanted. I think it's been working reasonably well for me, because I'm quite happy with where I am right now and where I'm going ahead with my masters. So again, so like I think it really, to come back to the question that you asked, it's going to mainly depend on your life, right? Because the obstacles that you face are going to be different for different people, and it's going to be up to you, or to define how you're going to overcome them. I think. I don't know if that answer was very vague, but I did the best I could.
No, 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 no. Totally, totally, totally. Makes sense. Your answer makes a lot of sense because, yeah, like you said, life for everybody is very different. It's not like a template that you can Control C, Control V, and make it work.
Right.
It's very different for everybody. Um, that level of copying and pasting can only happen in your head, but when you're actually living, it's very different to your expectations and what you have possibly set out for yourself as your goals and so on. So totally, no, your point made a whole lot of sense. But what I do want to touch on, I think this is maybe a bit of a deviation from what we were just talking about, but I think it does sort of connect. You mentioned how people sort of tend to judge you based off of where you are right now, but not necessarily
Mhm.
assessing the things that you've done in the past. Do you think, and the reason I'm asking, well, before I get into that, I'll just stop myself before I go into a different rabbit hole, because I tend to go into different tangents sometimes. But
Mhm.
um, does it matter for people to know the struggles that we've had? The reason I ask that is I think sometimes people don't really care. They only care when you've been successful. So
Mhm.
does it matter if they know whether you struggled or not? I'm not saying you specifically, but I
Again,
mean for a general sense.
I got it. I got it. I think it definitely does. Well, it doesn't matter from the point where you care about someone's validation, right? Like, for example, if someone thinks,
Mm,
oh, this guy is not a great, he hasn't really met his full potential, or he's not living up to what of society's standards. You don't really have to prove to anyone that, it is because of this that I couldn't achieve what I wanted, or, I couldn't meet your expectations because I'm fighting with these demons, in my life. You don't really have to prove it to anyone, but at the same time, I think it's important to have these stories out there because it kind of ties into what you were speaking in terms of, the stories of the winners or the stories of the losers, right? So even the winners are going to have some. There are going to be some cases where even the winners will tell you about the stories, about the battles that they faced to get there, and there are going to be a lot of cases where you're going to realize, the journey was not worth the end result. There are going to be better ways to get there. Like just to give you a concrete example, right? Getting into Google is the dream of a lot of IT professionals, right? Undeniably, because of the kind of salaries that they give, the benefits that you get, the location, all things considered, Google is one of the ideal places, one of the dream locations for a lot of people in IT. Now, there is this, coming back to the whole IIT thing, right? One way you could do it is you can grind for 4 years, get into IIT, with a CS degree, and at the end, when you graduate, you could get into an interview with someone from Google, and maybe you can get into Google as a graduate of IIT. That's one way to do it. But at the same time, there are plenty of people who never went to IITs, who went to some low ranked colleges, but then later found their passion, right? Worked hard on it, and then got into Google. Because you see, Google isn't just about IIT. It's not about IT, right? Google has a lot of different areas. Or even if you just talk about IIT, there are software engineers, there are machine learning engineers, there are people who work on healthcare side of IT, biotechnology. So there are so many different areas, and there are multiple paths to get to that destination, right? So one, for example, getting it through IIT is not for everyone, because that grind, the sacrifices that you have to make, it's not for everyone. So you could still go to a lower ranked college, put lower effort to in that area. Like maybe the time that you could have spent grinding for a JE mains, you could spend that time writing some code, building some projects, or developing other skills, communication, right? All these other skills, because at the end they're going to judge you based on the whole shebang, right? Based on how good you are for the company. So there are different ways to get there. So I think getting these stories out about the path that you take to get to whatever end goal, like I said, in my case, the struggles, talking about the struggles, or talking about the efforts, the steps that you took, the obstacles you faced, right? So I think it's important to get these stories out there so you realize, or you know what to anticipate, and then take a better decision for how you want to get there. I think that's how I would put it. So I think, yeah, just to pin things down, I think it is important for people to know about the struggles, not for personal
yeah,
validation, but for taking better decisions for themselves.
right, totally. And that's the sort of separation that we need to learn to make, right? Like, because at the end of the day, external validation is just some type of mental masturbation at the end of the day,
Yeah.
it's just sort of like something that makes you feel great about yourself, but not necessarily something that is fulfilling in the long run, if that's one way of putting it. um Because, yeah, I mean, it's life in itself. Like, I mean, this is coming from a 23-year-old, and, you know, life is very wishy-washy. Like, you don't know what's going to happen the next moment. So
Right.
it's
Yeah.
sort of like you have to learn to be on your toes. But at the same time, like, I think for me, how I try to look at it is, you know, at the end of the day, most things that happen to you are not necessarily the end of the world. It's probably going back to that point of no return thing that we were talking about earlier.
Right.
But it's not the end of the world.
Yeah,
Um,
I think this reminds me of this little quote I saw on the internet, which I think it's quite apt for the situation. Work is just a slice of life. It's not the whole pie. Like for
mm,
example, even if you got into some place like Google, right? If that's what your success was to you, that is just a slice of life and not the whole pie. I think that quote really stuck with me a lot. That's I think that's what I think it's quite apt talking about people who go to IITs. Right? It's just a slice of what your entire life is going to be.
right. And I mean, look again. Like, if you want to do IIT, like if you want to go to IIT, by all means, more power to you. Like, wishing you the best. There's nothing wrong with choosing that as a
Right.
career. But I do think that we need to realize that it's okay if it doesn't work out, and you can do something else. Like, your life is not done if you don't get into IIT.
Exactly. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, because I mean, I don't know the numbers or the figures, and I hate to go back to this, but like the amount of sort of deaths we've heard about because of school not working out or college not working out, it's really unfortunate. Like,
Hmm.
the extent that we've come to as human beings, to
Right. Right.
where we tie our level of success to find like material things. I mean, I don't know what your personal sort of philosophy is in terms of like materialism and spiritualism and all, spirituality and all that sort of stuff. But I am curious, or well, before I get into this, I'm curious, like, how would you best describe your philosophy as a human being, like in terms of life and stuff?
Wow, you just hit me with a big question, huh? Casually. uh, I don't know. I've never really thought about it, but I would say mainly I'm just facing one day at a time. There are a lot of things that are out of control right now that I wish I could control, especially because as I'm going through this whole this will it won't it period of my life where nothing is clear and I'm just constantly waiting for the next thing to happen. I think I'm just dealing with it on a per day basis. So I'm just going to get through today, and then I'm going to deal with the next tomorrow's problems tomorrow. That's how I'm going through life right now. It's been working out pretty
Mm,
well for me, and I'm just going to keep doing that. Like I have a general idea of where I want to be 5 6 months from now, right? Because of this, I want to be in California doing my masters, but there are n number of ways in which that could go wrong. There's still there's a chance of my visa interview going bad. There's a chance of my document coming in late. There's a chance that COVID cases could rise. God, touch wood, that doesn't happen. But there are so many ways in which it could go wrong. But I can't really, if I keep focusing on that, these are all things that are out of my control, right? I can't really make a difference. So I'm just gonna focus on the factors that I can control, and then also prepare backup and exit plans in case all hell breaks loose and the worst case scenario happens where I'm unemployed and I can't go to masters. So I'm just trying to go from today to tomorrow while also kind of preparing slowly for the worst case scenarios. I think that's how I'm going through life right now. So the way I like to phrase it is I am postponing my anxiety. I'm not going to deal with it now. I'm going to deal with those problems when I get to them. I'm not
fair enough.
postponing
I
my
see where
problems. I'm postponing my anxiety about those problems.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying. I'm curious because you brought up the point of control, and that's something that I learned during the time of COVID, especially, is that I can't control what someone chooses to do or chooses not to do. I don't know if people observe this as much in India, but over here, like, there's a lot of sort of this fucking bullshit, identity politics, wearing a mask, not wearing a mask. All of that bullshit was quite politicized.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, if you walked into a store without a mask, like, you, like some people would sort of react a certain way, or some people would call you names if you were of a certain descent, all that sort of stuff, would happen here, which is really unfortunate. But I, like, for me, that realization of control came in during that time, to where I was like, look, at the end of the day, I can only take care of myself. Like, as
Correct.
long as I do the best that I can to avoid anything bad happening, then that's all I can do. But
Exactly.
God forbid, but if a car just comes fucking running at me at a road and just, you know, did I like tell that car, yeah, come, all yours? No, so it's that's something that I like realized over that period of time. So I'm curious to know, when did that realization of control and the fact that you didn't have, or you don't have as much control as you think, sort of hit you?
I think the first time this hit me was right around the time of my diagnosis with this condition.
Mm.
So the thing that I have, it's so for a long time, right? I didn't know what it was. Crohn's disease. I didn't know what it was, and neither did my parents or anyone else, obviously, because they're not medical professionals. But for the longest time, I was being told that you're not eating right, or you're not eating enough, or eating too much junk food. So this kind of built this image in my head that I have to eat a certain way, I have to control everything that I eat, I have to be very careful. I did all of this only to be told later that the condition is genetic. And I mean, it's not genetic, but it's something that can, if you're going to have it, if you're destined to have it, you'll have it regardless of what you do. So that's kind of the first moment where I realized that there's only so much that you can do to control what happens to you, the obstacles that you face. All you can control is how you react to them, right? Now that I've been diagnosed with this chronic condition that I cannot control, what I can control is how much I let it affect my life, right? So now, because of being diagnosed with this for a few years, I now kind of learned how to identify patterns in the kind of food that I eat, how my body reacts to it. So now I have now for no matter what I do, where I go, I know that I can at least be in a position to evaluate myself and control how I react to it. Because at any time I could go into a flare and my stomach ache, my stomach could I mean, the symptoms could increase quite a bit. But I know at least how to go about handling myself in that situation. So I think the earliest realization I had was around the time of my diagnosis, because I realized, I have to do something about this. I have to control myself around this condition. So yeah, that's when I realized that. I think I
Mm.
that's what I tell a lot of people. Like, even though it's a little hard living with it, I probably wouldn't change it, because a lot of what I am right now I learned because of it, the way I approach life, or even this whole concept of unseen disabilities, where people, you just to put it this way, I've learned to give everyone the benefit of the doubt, or go by the whole innocent until proven guilty thing, right? Because you don't know what people are going through on a surface level. You'll only be able to judge them based on what you see. So, like, for example, if you see someone behaving a certain way, there may be a reason behind it. Maybe they've you know if you see someone acting violently in a mall, there might be a reason behind it. Maybe he has a mental illness, or maybe he recently went through something traumatic, or something difficult. We won't really know what he has been through, right? We only judge them based on what we see right in front of us. So I think in that aspect, because of my condition, I've learned to always take a moment before passing judgment on anyone, I would say. So
Mm. Mm.
I think that's one of the things that one of the best, uh, well, not the best, one of the strongest ways in which this has influenced me, or strongest ways in
Mm.
which it has changed me, I would say.
Totally. I mean, and I'm not saying it's beautiful that you have the disease, but it's beautiful that you look at it this way,
Yeah,
because it's very easy, like, to have a limiting mindset, to where,
right,
you can sort of be resigned to feeling like you're done for,
right.
So, I mean, I'm happy for you that you look at it that way, because that's probably one of the best things that we could do for ourselves as human beings. So, more power
Thank
to
you
you
so
for that, man. More power to you.
much. Thank you.
Um Yeah, I had another interesting question that popped up in my head. I don't know. I mean, I find it interesting, but I'm curious to know what your take is on this. Just a couple more questions before we taper off into the word association game and stuff.
Hmm.
But you mentioned that in your near future, you sort of try to plan an exit strategy, try to plan and see, okay, if this doesn't work out, I'll figure something out.
Hmm.
I've heard sort of these varying perspectives to where some people are like, just focus on path A, focus on path A. Don't give energy to part B or path C. Figure it out when it happens. But for now, just focus on path A. Whereas you have this other side that's kind of like, okay, give 85% to path A, give 10% to path B, and give 5% to path C. Do you think that, like for you, I guess from what you just said earlier, the second example probably works better for you in that, or you prefer the second example because you know what you can fall back onto if something doesn't go right?
Right, right, right.
Is like, because sometimes I feel like people try to prescribe these things to people. They're like, okay, do this is what will work for you. um so what do you think is your outlook on that sort of decision making of, okay, I'll just pursue this path, or okay, I'll pursue this path but I'll have other things on the side? Like, how do you see that sort of, that juncture where you can make that decision?
No, I think you're definitely right because I'm strongly leaning towards the second one of those examples. So while I do think it's important to play the long-term game with one particular, path that you mentioned, I think it's always important to have like another exit strategy planned and ready because it's kind of the same as diversifying your portfolio, I guess. Like if you take an
Mm, mm,
analogy
mm.
analogy with investments, right? If you put all your eggs in one basket and then when you drop that basket you're going to break every single egg that was in it, right? What are you going to do at that point? So I think it's always good to have a backup strategy. I think my okay so let me give you an example. The person I think there's one person who embodies this thing we're talking about very well. The company that I worked for recently before taking a break, right? I had an operations manager who has been in the IT field for about maybe 20, 30 years, maybe. He's
Mm. Oh,
just
wow.
extremely experienced guy who's been all around the world, worked in many different companies. And there was one of these conversations in which he came up that he spoke to me about. So when you look at him and his background in IT as a manager or as in a leadership position, right? You would think that no matter where this person went, he'll find some job in management. That's the idea that I had. So no matter where he goes, he's always going to have the option of becoming a job as a manager somewhere because of the amount of experience that he has and what he brings to the table is going to be highly in demand wherever he goes. But in one of the conversations that I had, I was quite surprised when this topic came up. He said that his backup job, whenever he goes somewhere, is as a classical musician. This took me aback because given his experience, given his role in the company, you'd think, no, this guy is he's knee deep in IT. Why would he do this? But then he told me that because he was so passionate about classical music at a young age, he started learning the saxophone, the piano, and all those things. And he said that now wherever he goes in around the world, even if he can't get into IT, right? He knows that because of his skill in classical music, he's going to be at least able to stand on the side of a street, play the saxophone, and get some money. So that is the level of the contingency that he has planned for himself. Even though he has like decades of experience in IT, he still has this as a musician, a career as a musician as a backup. So again, I think that was kind of inspiring to me in terms of always having that second option. So I think that would be my stance on it. Like I would always want to put most of my energy in one field, or also having a backup option. You never know what's going to happen because especially considering the rate at which we are all progressing, right? Even in my case, right, I'm putting more. I would want to put most of my experience in becoming a better programmer, a better software engineer. But at the same time, I would also want to try to learn more about management, about business as a backup strategy, because the way IT is progressing right now, it would I do I mean, the thought that 10 years or 20 years down the line, programmers are going to be all replaced by self-sufficient programs which are just going to write code for us. Given even if that were to happen, which may or may not happen, I know that I'll still be able to at least shift to a management role where I'm managing teams. So at least I have that backup. So I think that would be where I would be, what I would do. I would be putting most of my energy in one track while also preparing myself on the side for a backup.
Gotcha. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Um, this is another interesting sort of question I had, and I think this is something that I was thinking about recently because of some questions that came my way. Um, I don't know if you've heard of these people, but um, there's like a Lex Friedman and Andrew Huberman. Have you heard of these people at all? I'm
I
just
don't think I
curious.
have Lex Friedman. The name sound
Lex Friedman.
familiar.
Yeah, I think he's like a scientist,
Mm-hmm.
professor. He used to teach at MIT, and he also has his own podcast now where he talks to a wide-ranging amount of people about different things. Um, and Andrew Huberman is similar. I think he's a neurobiologist. I take that back. I'm not sure. It's one of the something to do with neurology or something along those lines. Um, and he also has a podcast of his own. Now, the reason why I'm bringing this up is because I'm curious to know, from your own outlook, and from it's sort of this thought was triggered. Excuse me, when you mentioned the fact that the person you worked with also had this musician's background. Are we headed
Mm-hmm.
in the future where we will see scientists also making money through music on YouTube or podcasting or I don't know, dancing as a backup dancer or whatever? Like, do you think that we're headed in that direction as a world? Maybe I'm looking at this from a perspective of the US, but I'm curious to know, like, generally speaking, even from what you see in India, do you think that we might be headed in that direction?
Just to clarify, your question is, you
Sure.
people from different backgrounds are now finding ways to make an income online, right? That's the question.
Online, I guess, in some sense, like to truncate it and put a bow on the question, I guess people are diversifying
I
their
think
sources of income.
Right,
So
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah. So that, yeah, I think definitely 100% without a doubt, that's where we're headed. Because especially now, I think it has become more prevalent because of these features like YouTube Shorts and Instagram Reels and all of that, right? I see, especially considering the amount of content I consume on the internet, I often come across lawyers, doctors, surgeons who are now posting shorts, addressing different questions that the general population might have. Now, for example, I think a couple of prominent ones that come to my mind. There's this guy called Mike, who's a lawyer, right? So he has a law degree, and he has a channel called Law by Mike, I believe. So in that channel he makes a lot of YouTube shorts, and they're quite entertaining. YouTube shorts about what to do if you're faced in different legal situations. Now, for instance, a recent one that I and these are all quite informative, right? These are things that you would have wished you would have known. Now, for instance, recently he had a short where he mentioned about how cops, right? He's an American, so it speaks from the point of view of a U.S. law, citizen who's faced with the U.S. law. He was talking about how whether it is legally allowed for a cop to enter your house without a warrant. So they were talking. So he was talking about how uh, unless they have a warrant, I believe they cannot enter your house. But if they have valid reason to suspect that you're hiding something, then they can, I believe. That's what he was talking about. So just to give an example, right? This is all entertaining and also widely informative. So this is a lawyer. It's not someone that's, a lawyer wouldn't be the first person to think that you would think of when you think of someone who's making content on the internet, right? Who's making YouTube videos. Similarly, there are also doctors. There's a person called Dana who's a foot doctor, and then there's another person. There's another Canadian surgeon who's a plastic surgeon. So these guys, what has happened now is the community asks questions which may or may not be silly, related to their field, and these guys answer it on YouTube Shorts or YouTube videos, and they earn a hefty sum of income, right? Because of the ads and whatnot, because of the views and however the mythical YouTube algorithm works, right? These guys are earning. This is a side income for them. At the same time, the people are getting valuable information, right? So I definitely see this becoming more and more common going forward, where people in different niches of life are going to be, creating content on the internet. Because the way I look at it, right, there is an audience for everything on the internet. No matter how small you think your niche is, right, there is an audience for it. It's just a matter of how you market yourself and how you put yourself on the internet to attract the right audience, right? Like even me, like I would like to consider myself as an average internet enjoyer, right? I often find myself watching the weirdest videos on YouTube that I never thought would entertain me. The other day I didn't realize that I was mindlessly scrolling, and I found myself watching a video of a carpenter teaching me how to cut a dovetail joint into a piece of wood. Like, at what point in my life will I ever use this, right? But then I saw that video had like 100,000 views. Like, are you telling me there are 100,000 people who are watching this video to learn how to make a dovetail joint? Not really. They're watching it because it's entertaining, right? So there's a niche for everything. In fact, one of the most inspiring stories that I saw recently on Instagram was this. I think she's Malayali. She's a mother of three kids who's probably in her 40s, who makes videos of herself dancing to Bollywood music, wearing a sari and shoes, and she has gathered a huge audience. Now you think it's such a niche thing, right? But it has garnered such a big audience, and now she's earning an income from it. It's all these stories are quite inspiring. Like regular everyday people who otherwise may not have had an outlet for their creativity, they are now finding an audience on the internet, and their audience is international. Think about it. One woman who would have otherwise maybe spent her time mothering her kids or as a housewife or whatever, she has now found her passion on the internet and now has people from all over the world watching her videos and bringing her an income. So I think because of the way the internet is set up, the internet wants you to succeed, right? If you have it in you to put yourself out there, the internet will make sure you succeed. So I think that's what I think that's the way a lot of us are going to be headed in the future.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a very interesting story of the sari and shoes. I've never come across it. That I mean, I don't watch YouTube Shorts or TikTok or Instagram Reels, so I'm not
Right.
aware. But yeah, that's fascinating. Like, and I totally agree with you about the niches and how there is an audience for you out there. It just depends on how you market yourself, like you said, and what you put out. So definitely, I agree with everything that you said. To sort of bring this into the latter stages of the podcast, just sort of a winding down question before we head into the word association game. How would you best describe Pawan Bhandarkar?
Ah, let's see. I would describe myself as anxious, but flexible, I think. Like I'm anxious about a lot of things, but I also know how to work around them. I don't know if that's a weird way to describe myself. Like, I know what I want, I know how to get there, and I also know all the things that are gonna go wrong. But I also know how to prepare and go around them. I think that's how I would describe myself. I don't know. I wasn't. That's how I would say.
That's fascinating. That's fascinating. I don't know why I said that three times. Sort of like an echo. Anyway, I do dumb shit. That's fascinating, though. Anyway, but yeah, man. Like, I mean, I appreciate you sharing all of this. So thank you so much for sharing everything that you did,
Definitely,
Pawan.
man.
Like
Thanks
the
for having
amount
me
of
here.
yeah, totally, man. Totally. But cool. Let's get into the word association game. It's called Bish Bash Bosh, where basically I give you 5 different words, one at a time, and you have
Mm-hmm.
to respond to each word in three phrases or three other words.
Mm-hmm.
And I've done this with every guest, where I give every guest, barring one, I give them the same words to see how they respond to
Mm-hmm.
the same words differently or similarly. And so,
Mm-hmm.
for those of you who are new around here, who are listening or watching, you can also find these clips on Instagram at Random Relatability. I upload these when the episodes come out too, so you can go and check them out. But yeah, basically, does that make sense, or do you want an example?
No, I think it makes sense. So you're gonna give me a word, and I'm gonna have to respond with three other words or three other phrases that I think relate the most
Correct.
to that word. Yeah.
Correct. And it doesn't have to you don't necessarily have to think too much about it. It can just be the few words that jump out to you, and you don't
Mm-hmm.
necessarily have to give context. But if you feel the need to give context to those words, feel free to. It's up to
Sure.
you. It's your call.
Sure. And is there a time limit for
Cool.
how quickly I need to respond to these
No,
words? Okay, great.
no. You're good. Cool. So the first word is differences. What are the three things that sort of are popping in
Differences.
your head?
Hmm. Differences. I would say experiences and uh, hard work. I would say that's. I don't know why that's coming to my mind. Hard work, experiences, hard work, and success. I think these three words. Okay, so yeah, I'm gonna go with this: experiences, hard work, and success. I could. I think I could explain why I would choose those words. So
It's up to you. You
experiences,
don't
like
have
I
to,
said,
but it's up to you.
I think let's do this one. So I think I'm pretty confident in why I chose these words. So I think experiences, because like we spoke throughout the call, our experiences are going to be, every each one of us is going to have a different experience in terms of life in general, right? Hard work, because this is something that we didn't touch upon so far, but I think that a lot of us have a different idea of what hard work means. I don't know if that's a little
Mm.
difficult to understand, but
No, I get
so
it.
I know a lot of people, especially in my personal friend sphere, who believe that hard work is just getting into that hustle culture, working all day, every day towards one single thing, not taking breaks, and then bragging about how tired you are, which is a very weird thing for me that I've noticed.
Yeah,
People like to brag about how busy they are. So that's something that I've always disagreed with. So I think that's where the differences, in my opinion, come in. That's where it came into my mind, because I always feel that hard work does not necessarily have to be the kind of work that keeps you busy all day. Like, you should always try to find a balance between pursuing your goals and making time for the people who are important in your life. And then success, again, because like I mentioned, the definition of success is different for different people, I believe. So I think that's why these three phrases came to my mind.
Hmm. Awesome. The second word is nuances or nuance.
Nuances. Let me think. That's a tough one, man. Nuances. What do I? Hmm.
Anything that's sort of like in your head right now.
I'm trying up a blank for this one. Let's see.
Hmm.
Friendships. I believe that would be the
Okay,
first phrase.
interesting.
Friendships. Hmm. People. Friendships. People and flavors. Why am I thinking of flavors? I think it's three
Fascinating. I
words.
like that. I don't think we've gotten flavors for nuance, but I like it. I like it.
I mean, I don't know. I think when I think of nuance, I think about like complexity. And what is more
Right.
complex than a well prepared dish? I think.
Very
I don't know
true.
if that makes sense. I mean, I
Very true. Go on
generally
with it.
tend to, I have a very delicate relationship with food. And I think for me, I take a lot of, there's a lot of thought process that goes into what I put into my mouth. So for me, I think that's a very nuanced decision that I have to make. I don't know.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Fair enough. The third word is learning.
Learning. First one is lifelong, of course. First one would
Hmm.
be lifelong. It's a lifelong journey. Learning. Okay, I can say a phrase you said, right?
Yeah.
I can say so. Learning, I would say, accessible is my second word. And I say this because of how accessible education has become to all of us in this day and age, as opposed to, maybe a decade ago or 2 decades ago. So accessible, lifelong, and learning. Hmm. I know what I want to say, but I'm looking for the word. It's the I okay. So let me just put it in a sentence. I think learning is better when you have someone to learn with. So the
Hmm.
word I'm looking for is community, maybe. Community. Let's go with
Mm-hmm.
that. So community, lifelong, and what's the other word I said?
Accessible.
Accessible. Yes, those three are my words.
Awesome. The fourth word is empathy.
Empathy. So first phrase is non-negotiable because I think everyone needs to have empathy towards their fellow people. That's the first one. Second one, I would like to say, hmm, patience. I want to say, because I think patience and empathy often go hand in hand, right? Thirdly, empathy. Companionship.
Hmm. I
Companionship.
like that. I like that.
Hmm.
Cool. Well, for the last word for this segment, similarities. What are some things that are calling out to you when you hear the word similarities?
Similarities. Huh? Hmm, similarities. I want to say outcomes is the first word, and I say this because it ties into what we were discussing about how there can be different paths that you can take in life, which may have slightly different outcomes that generally have similar rewards, right? So it's up to you to decide what path you want to take because is it worth it for you at the end of the day? So
Hmm.
outcomes. Hmm, damn, this is hard. I want to say people again. I want to say people again, and then let's see similarity. I want to say technology. Third one is technology because I say this because, like I said, because of the way technology has been advancing so far, I think there are some spheres where we are kind of hitting a plateau, right? Now, for example, if you look at the new smartphones or the new laptops that come out every single year, I think the newer ones generally tend to be quite similar to the ones that came out last year. So there's been this whole debate that's been going around recently about how we've been hitting a plateau in terms of how good a phone can get because of how similar they are to the last ones. I don't know. So those three are the words that I would say that came up to me the first time.
Awesome. Awesome. I love all the comparisons and the examples you shared. So thank you so much for playing along on this segment of Bish Bash Boss. Just a couple questions before we get done. Firstly, how do you relate to people?
How do I relate to people?
Yeah.
Hmm, I think I relate to people in terms of, like I said, not judging them until I know the whole story. I don't know if that makes sense, right? Because I
Hmm.
think I'm able to relate to a lot of the difficulties that people go through, or at least the sense of not being understood, right? Because I think a lot of people, when they go through a difficult time, they have this sense of, no one understands me, I'm alone in this world, right? I think that's the feeling that I've been able to relate to a lot. And the conclusion that I've always arrived at is that we're never really alone, right? There's if you just need to know where to look, and you'll always find someone who's been going through the same problems as you are, or at least similar ones, or at least someone you can discuss it with to understand your problems better and try to figure out how to get through it. So I think that's something that so that's how I would relate to people in terms of understanding the feeling of being alone. So that's how I can relate.
Awesome, awesome. And the last question, well, it's not really a question, but do you have a parting thought that you'd like to leave with for those of them who are listening and watching? Anything that you'd like to share, if you want to share your socials or share a thought, whatever it may be.
Oh, sure. I can share my socials. So
Up to you. I mean, you don't need to if you don't want to, but whatever you want to share, that's it. Yeah.
I'm okay with sharing my socials, but I cannot be asked for an explanation for why my handle is called @radioactive.poop. You don't ask me about it. If you're not going to ask me about it, you can have it. Yeah. But apart from that, I think my only parting thought would be just, if you ever feel like you're stuck and it feels like it's the end of the line, just know that it's not, and there's always going to be a plan B. There's always going to be time to make a plan B, right? So it's never too late to just completely make a shift in your life or completely turn things around. You just have to keep at it and try to find a community and try to find people who'll be able to support you through this journey. And I think it's at the end it's all going to work out. So that's just my parting thought to the podcast.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Pawan, for sharing everything that you did. I really appreciate you taking the time and just being quite open about everything that you shared.
The pleasure is all mine, my friend. Thank you so much.
Yeah, totally. And for those of you listening and watching, thank you so much. We'll see you guys next time.